all of you. No one had to teach you or force revelation down your throat. You couldn't wait to tell somebody about revelation. You were drawn to the weird stories you knew exactly. You knew you would be here with this mindset at this moment. But what you've got to do now is fight to keep your faith. Don't ever let anything contend with you so much that you would begin to doubt Christ. That's your move. You have to do that, because the people who allowed an alternative thought to hit their minds without Christ, thinking there would be no Christ. And believe me, these people that went back, that never came back to the assembly, I know how they thought. Did they believe in Christ? Yes. But they also entertained the fact that it might not come. That's what they entertained. That maybe everybody had it wrong. Are you listening to me? They entertained the thought that people could have gotten it wrong. That's what they entertained. That small bit of pause in their faith in Christ was enough to condemn them to an eternity of separation of all light. And I felt so sorry for the guy who went down. Listen, I felt what he felt. You know what he looked at as he was descending? His daughter who needed him. He knew he would never be able to help her. That was painful, right? That dream was painful for me, because each person that perished, I had to go through what they went through. That girl that went down, she had so many hopes she could have fulfilled. She was almost, let me tell you what she was doing. She had money, but what she was doing was building up a type of, I don't know, empire or something like that. And she had a plan in her mind when she was about to set her family up where they would never have to worry about anything. And they knew nothing about it. And she was working toward that goal. When she was descending, that was a crushing blow, because her father was in the hospital. She had just talked to her mother about the hospital bills, and she smiled, saying, hey, God will take care of it. That's exactly what she said. God will take care of it, because she knew she had the finances finally to do it. All her dreams were crushed, all because she left the assembly. And I believe that assembly signifies the real gospel of Jesus Christ. The real gospel. The gospel where you don't hate everybody and then try to follow Christ, but the gospel where you say, you know what, I need to recognize who I am in Christ and do this wholeheartedly or not at all. Because I'll tell you right now, there is no in between. There's no fence. There's no fence. People are deceiving themselves, thinking that they're waiting on something. But I hope that you guys are never in those people's positions, because they were also Christians. But they had enough of a thought that would cause them to look away from Christ from time to time. And I'm telling you, that's enough to condemn you. If you're caught, these people had a sense of pride, like, no calamity would happen to them. They had a feeling that they were protected, this, that, and the other. You don't want their fate. And the people who stayed there in the crowd, do or die, they would not look away from Jesus Christ. They would not do it. Were they tempted? Oh, yes, but they would not do it. Did some of them still have habits? One guy had a flask in his pocket, and he changed. His clothing changed. Listen, some of these people had problems, but they did not turn away from Christ. They didn't turn away from Christ, because I'm sitting there observing these people who were going to this meeting, and I'm telling you, some of them were dirty. Some of them were, nobody should have done some. These people did. They did not change themselves. Their presence of staying there changed them over time. They went from raggedy clothes or the wrong clothes to 100% white clothing. They did not do that. They didn't even perceive that they were changing. The health problems, gone. All the blemishes, scars, all the deformities, whatever they had, gone. Gone, it was gone. Their clothing changed. It was altered. Every single child that was there was pure. Every adult there, pure and purified. They did not do that. That was a result of them not turning away from Christ. And it was incredibly sorrowful. Because those people that turned away, they weren't bad people. They were not. Some of them were quite devout. But again, they had that nagging thought, what if it's not even real? And that was enough. When they acted on that thought, they messed up. When they set up a bridge, right? You know how you have your backup plan? Let me get my backup plan together, they said to themselves. Just in case. Listen, folks, don't have a backup plan when it comes to Christ. You're either in it or you are not. There is no halfway. And if you have a backup plan, you're in trouble. Because a backup plan means you have no faith in the resolve of Christ. This is not the time. Also, do you guys remember me telling you one of the most important factors? I remember I explained it to everybody. I don't think anybody understood. Back then, the faith inside of all of us was different than it is now. Let me explain. Back then, I said to everybody, I pray I'm not caught off guard. I pray I'm not caught off guard. You guys remember that? And I continue to say that for the last 10, 11 years, didn't I? I pray I'm not caught off guard. I don't want to be caught off guard. Do you know what people were thinking at that time? They weren't. They were normalizing. Even the ones that stayed, they had no, the faith, the high level of faith they had prior to that time, they did not have getting there. If Jesus did not save them and change them, they would not have been saved, because all the time, it was almost like their faith was strained. People had a hard time mustering that faith they once had. Those people who walked away were caught off guard. They normalized. I remember their thoughts. They weren't. Do you guys remember about 10 years ago how on fire you were for the Lord? You remember around 2012 how on fire you were for the Lord. Your expectation of his arrival, of things. You remember that? During this time of the gathering, it will dwindle. It'll be strained. It'll be opposed by a tumult of things that will be happening in the world. Safeguard your faith. Safeguard your faith. Safeguard it. When something comes up to challenge your faith, you hold it even tighter. When it looks like your situation is not turning around, you thank God for your very life. But find a way to fight the good fight of faith. Find a way so that you're not lost. Somebody said, what? He did show up, and somebody said those that had the flask, what? They were changed. They didn't have the flask when they were changed. I'm telling you that people still had problems, but they believed in Christ. People were still incomplete, but they still believed in Christ. Do you hear me? The people that changed at this gathering from raggedy clothes or the wrong clothes to pure white clothing, they still had issues and problems. I know that. You could see that one guy had a flannel shirt with 2 cigarette packs in his pocket. So they still had habits, but guess what? They let nothing stop them from the gathering. They let nothing stop them from going head first into the gospel. One guy did have a flask full of alcohol. I could smell it. But he did not let that alcohol stop him from coming to Christ. And listen, it is Christ that will make the change. All you have to do is follow him, and you will change. But these times we live in right now, don't you? This is different than 10 years. Don't you all feel like something is assaulting your faith? Like it's some days your faith, you're kind of numbing your faith. Don't you feel it? Don't you perceive it? Don't you? Don't you have to motivate yourself in faith? You didn't, it was not that way. Sometimes you'd wake up, something would capture your attention. You'd be totally locked into prophecy. Now you have to be motivated. Now, sometimes things are not so interesting as they were back then. We're in those moments. And you all know sometimes the Lord will give me things to share with you guys that happens. Right? It's not that I'm someone. I'm no one. But I am the one with the microphone. I'm also the one that will trust his word he gives me. There are some wake-up calls, some purposed tumults that will begin unfolding. COVID-19 is just one of them. Now, I'm always wary about speaking about things before they take place. Just in case you didn't know that it was like that with the Russians before ISIS. Do you guys remember that? Just in case you don't know, I shared a dream with everybody about Russia. And then the next thing you know, Russia and ISIS was on the scene in the Middle East. Right? There were other places for it. But the Lord does this, and I'll explain it one more time. All right? The Lord does this with me because I'm the one with the microphone. I'm the one that say yes. I'm the one foolish enough to go before anybody. And if the Lord instructs me to go ahead and tell it, if he moves me to tell it, then I'll do it without reservation. Whether it comes true or not is up to the Lord, right? But I certainly do trust whatever he gives me. And I'm telling you right now, within days, people are not ready for some of the tumults that will take place. I know it's around Christmas. I know that. I also know the hearts involved in this regard. But let me ask you, let me explain something to you. When it comes to your eternal salvation, the Lord wants you ready always. Not ready when it's convenient for everybody. So at a very inconvenient time, things must happen to remind you that we must be ready always. No matter what. Remember that. So that you know it. So if anything takes place at one of those inconvenient times for the world, then you know you're to be ready always. Never set Christ aside for anything. And every day of your life, seek to follow him even more. Because he's the one that will make a change in all of us. For a long time, I used to think that I had to make the change. Was anybody like that? All I had to do was choose. All you had to do was choose. And someone who truly chooses to follow Christ, they don't turn away from him. When you truly choose. And just by not turning away, he's getting out all the spots and wrinkles. He'll do the undoing of many things in your life that are full of iniquity. It's by his blood you're washed, that you're cleansed. He's doing the work. He's the one preparing to present to himself a church without spot or wrinkle. The church belongs to him. He's the one that walks amongst the 7 golden candlesticks. He names who's part of his body and who is not. We get the call, but we all know that few are chosen. We know that the harvest is ripe, but the laborers are few. We know this. It's already ready. That's why he said, pray to the Lord of the harvest. Because the harvest has been ready. And you're joint heirs in the mode of harvesting. You're helping in this harvest. Because every time you go forward with the gospel, somebody is nourished. Every time you uphold the ways of the Lord, every time you cling to your faith, someone sees you do that, and someone is nourished. You're helping in this harvest.